Hello and welcome back to Stop and Go F1 for this, our driver ratings for the Monaco Grand Prix. A race which was very bad, but nonetheless had some very good driver performances and some very bad driver performances. Yeah, I think that's all I need to say on that bit there. It was possibly the worst race I've seen in quite a long time. Like I said in the reaction video, despite it being bad, it still had a very satisfactory ending, very emotional. But yeah, it wasn't good. All the coverage for the weekend is available on the channel, including the F2 and the F3. I especially recommend checking out the F2 because it was incredible. I don't think has it ever gone from such a high of Formula 2 racing standard to such a low of Formula 1 racing standard in a matter of hours. But there you go. Let's talk about the Formula 1 though, and let's talk about driver ratings. Starting with our Haas lads. Kevin Magnussen. So the Haas ones are quite difficult to mark. Firstly because they both got disqualified from qualifying, which obviously is not the driver's fault. And then they didn't make it to the second corner, which you could argue is at least one of the driver's faults. Now, I've seen some arguments online as to who was to blame for the whole crash. Personally, I think Magnussen should be the one more at blame than anyone else, but I could understand if people see it differently. So he initially qualified 15th, got disqualified, starts from the back, and then gets a DNF on lap 1. Magnussen, I am giving a 2 out of 10. As I said, I personally see that he was the one more responsible for the crash than anyone else. His qualifying was pretty decent, but that crash also led to his teammate being knocked out as well. So, although it was not as bad as a different teammate crash that we'll get onto later on, still not great. And that's a 2 out of 10 for Magnussen. Now, Hülkenberg, his qualifying was a little bit better. He qualified 12th, but nonetheless ended the same way with disqualification. And his race ended the same way with a DNF. I'm going to give him a 5, though, just because his qualifying was better. And really, in that crash, there's nothing he could do apart from basically just stop the car and hope for the best. But yeah, just caught up in that. Really, really unlucky. And, I feel like, yes, everything went against Hülkenberg this weekend. Everything bad that happened to him, he had nothing to do with. And what he actually showed, which was his laps in qualifying, were pretty decent. So, a 5 for Nico Hülkenberg. Zhou Guanyu, though, not great for him. He qualified, I've put 19th here, but I think it must have been 18th. He actually qualified last, again. And he finished 16th, which sounds good until you remember that there were 4 DNFs. And he was 40 seconds behind Logan Sargent. Zhou is having a dreadful year. I know the Stake F1 team Kick Sauber car isn't great, but Zhou is not getting anything out of it. And it's just really quite bad. I've given him a 2. Now, someone who is getting something out of it is Valtteri Bottas. Now, you see, we've had this discussion before about, points lower than the top 10. And I personally I'm for it, just because I feel the top 5 teams have got such a strong base now that the rest of them are kind of screwed. And the thing is, if you look at the drivers' standings at the minute, you will think that Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu have had similar years, because they're both on 0 points. But that is just not the case, especially when you look at Bottas' race this weekend, when he started 17th and ended 13th. That's, of course there are the DNFs that happen there, but he still beat a couple cars who are faster than him at a track where, you can't really overtake. So I think Valtteri Bottas deserves quite a high score this weekend, and I've given him one. I've given him an 8. Very good score for Valtteri Bottas there. Across to Yuki Tsunoda now. And now we start the fun thing of the guys who are in the top 10. Because for the first time in Formula 1 history, the top 10 at the start of the race was exactly the same as the top 10 at the end of the race. All 10 drivers the same in the exact same positions. So Yuki Tsunoda started 8th, ended 8th. I've given him an 8. More good points for the Racing Bills. His teammate, though, Daniel Ricciardo, not as good a weekend, but not a massive disaster. He started 12th and finished 12th, so that is a 7 out of 10 for him from me there. I think still pretty good for him. There was part of me that was expecting him to be a little bit better this weekend, because obviously Daniel Ricciardo has the history with Monaco, but he's not really been that Monaco specialist for a while now, so maybe that trust was kind of misplaced there. But I still think, 12th in that car was pretty decent. So yeah, 7 out of 10 for him. Logan Sargent now, we get into the Williams team. He qualified 15th and finished 15th. I mean, I'm going to give him a 5. I'm tempted to, actually, I'm going to give him a 6. Because you know what? Despite, not gaining any positions in the total of the race or whatever, he beat Sergio Perez in qualifying, which firstly is just a madness. And secondly, he actually did do some overtakes in the race. He overtook Zhou, I think, a couple times. So a 6 out of 10 for Logan Sargent. A very good weekend for him in Monaco. Alex Albon, though, had an even better weekend, scoring the first points for the Williams team this year. He qualified 9th, finishes 9th. He's getting a 10. Fantastic results from Alex Albon. Points on the board for the Williams team. Oh, look who it is. Remember the foreshadowing I said earlier about an even worse teammate crash? Here's Esteban Ocon. Decent qualifying for Ocon. He qualified in 11th, but he would not finish the race. And that's because he went for one of the most ridiculous dive bombs you've ever seen just before the tunnel on his teammate, nearly taking out both him and Gasly. It did take out himself, though. He was out of the race from lap 1. Such a bad crash that there's now rumours of him being suspended from the Alpine team. So yeah, a bad one for Esteban Ocon. I'm going to give him a 1. Now, I would give him a 0, but I thought his qualifying was pretty decent and he deserved to have 1 point. So there it is. His teammate, on the other hand, though, Pierre Gasly, good weekend for him. Qualified 10th, finishes 10th, gets 10 points because he got 1 point for the Alpine team, his first point of the year. Alpine now on a grand total of 2 points. The points doubled over the weekend. Fantastic performance from Pierre Gasly, who probably was suffering damage due to that collision with Ocon. Across to Lance Stroll now. Oh my God. Difficult one for Lance Stroll. He qualified 13th, would finish the race in 14th. Fernando Alonso sacrificed his entire race to make sure that Lance Stroll had a lovely little pit stop gap for him to pit into, get new tyres on the car, then push towards the end of the race. That push lasted 7 laps because Stroll hit the wall, had a puncture, and had to pit again. Then he was on the soft tyres, and I think this was at the time when the fastest lap was held by Valtteri Bottas on the hard tyres, and I believe he got it a lap around about 18, 19, around about then. This was lap 40-something, the car much lighter in terms of fuel loads. Lance Stroll in an Aston Martin, which is much faster than a Sauber, on the softs, which are much faster than the hards, and Lance Stroll could not beat the fastest lap time of Valtteri Bottas. Really bad weekend from Stroll, who was entrusted by the Aston team to secure some good points this weekend. Well, I'm going to give him a 3. And I did initially give him a 4 on my piece of paper. I'm changing that to a 3. Fernando Alonso, though, bad qualifying for Alonso. Out-qualified by his teammate again. He qualified in 14th place. But then he would turn that around to a 11th, just missing out on points. The Aston not really working well for him at the moment. And like I said before, with Lance, he sacrificed his entire race, really played the team game, and that didn't come through to him. So I'm going to give Alonso a 7, because I think he drove well over the weekend and really played the team game rather well. Someone who drove better, though, is Oscar Piastri. P2 qualified, P2 finished, 10 out of 10. Fantastic job from Oscar Piastri. To think this is only his second time around Monaco, and he was only like a fine margin off the back of Charles Leclerc, who is a Monaco qualifying specialist at this point. 3 pole positions in Monaco for Charles Leclerc. And then Oscar Piastri to be not that far off the back of him consistently, really, as well, throughout all of Q3. Fantastic job. Coped really well from the pressure from Sainz at the end of the race when his tyres were going. You know, we talked all last year about Oscar Piastri being this guy who struggled with tyre management. For him to come through in this race and do what he did, fantastic job, fantastic podium, great job. P2, 10 points. Across to Lando Norris now. And Lando Norris qualified 4th, finishes 4th. I'm going to give him an 8. Another decent job from Lando Norris, just missing out on the podium, but getting some good points nonetheless. And who knows, he might even be in a title battle the way things are going. So yeah, good stuff there from Lando Norris. As we move now to the Ferrari lads. Firstly, Carlos Sainz qualified 3rd, finished up in 3rd. I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10. I think really his performance this weekend was very good. We know that he's pretty good around Monaco. He's had a few podiums here, missed out on a win. I think, who knows where his future is leading, but if he's in a decent car, I think a Monaco Grand Prix win will be in his future because he is very good around here. I think he very much played the team game as well, really, in a lot of the race, kind of making sure that gap between Norris and Russell didn't grow too big to give Norris a chance to pit onto the soft tyres or onto new mediums. So I think he did a very good job here and got the points, got the podium. 9 out of 10 for him. Here's his teammate though, Charles Leclerc, qualified on pole, finished the race in 1st. 10 out of 10 is as easy as that. Fantastic job for him. Really managed the race well all the way through. Never seemed to really struggle all weekend. Just really, really good stuff. And to finally win his home Grand Prix is fantastic stuff as well. This year we've really had a lot of I'm going to call it fan moments. These moments that fans have been calling out for a long time. With Lando's first win, Charles winning his home Grand Prix. That's 2 things that a lot of fans have wanted to see for a long time. And they've come now within the course of 3 races. That's fantastic. Who knows what else this season could bring. At this point, we might even have a freeway title fight, which is madness. Let's talk about Mercedes, though. They're not in a title fight. But George Russell did relatively well this weekend. Qualified 5th, finished 5th, did the entire race on medium tyres, which, is, got to commend him for. Great job managing the tyres. He was massively off the pace of everyone else, but he had to be. Also, it's kind of Pirelli's fault for letting that be a thing, but there you go. I'm going to give him an 8, nonetheless. Decent result from George Russell and some very good points for the Mercedes team. Lewis Hamilton, he qualified 7th, finished the race in 7th. I'm going to give him a 7. Wasn't really on the pace of George throughout the entire qualifying, really. He looked good in practice, but he always does. And then in the race, when he said, I didn't know outlap was critical, the outlap is always critical, especially when you're in Monaco and you're that close to someone else in front of you in your pit. I mean, he's been here a long time, and I think, I've said this multiple times now, but he's checked out. He doesn't care. He does not care how this season goes whatsoever. He's just waiting for this time next year when he's wearing red and he might be able to win this race. Let's go across to the Red Bull guys now. Firstly, Sergio Perez. He would qualify 16th and then not finish the race. Awful qualifying for him. I'm going to give him 3 points though, just because I'll change that to a 2. Yeah, that's 2's more reasonable, I think, because I don't think that crash was his fault, but there is things he could have done to prevent it. Firstly, having a better qualifying than 16th place and not being in that position. But yeah, another bad result for Sergio Perez on the European Tour of Sadness. And finally, Max Verstappen. Normally I go started P1, finished P1, 10 out of 10. But today I'm going to go started P6, ended P6, 7 out of 10. Which I think might just be one of the lowest scores I've ever given to Max Verstappen when he's finished a race. But yeah, I think he did relatively well, really. The car just was not on it this weekend for either of the Red Bull guys. They were really struggling through practice sessions as well. Max complaining of headaches and feeling sick. To put it in a position where it's P6, I think is pretty good. He pushed quite well in the race after that pit stop as well, but then just could not get past Russell. So overall, I think a 7 is pretty fair for Max Verstappen there. So at the end, our high scorers are Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, Pierre Gasly, and Alexander Albon. The lowest scorer is Esteban Ocon with a 1 out of 10. Let me know what you think of these driver ratings. Let me know how you would rate people as well. And we'll be back on Friday for another video. Until then, though, have a good one. I'll see you then. Goodbye.